Jessica Carter had worked too hard to let someone ruin the one thing that truly belonged to her. At 45, she had finally achieved what had once felt like a distant dream. Her sleek, modern house stood proud in the warm, sun-soaked hills of Malibu, California, surrounded by towering privacy hedges that swayed gently in the breeze. It wasn't a gift or an inheritance. Every square inch of it was hers, earned through countless late nights, missed weekends, and an unwavering grit that kept her moving forward even when life tried to drag her down. From the stylish open-plan kitchen where she brewed her morning coffee to the shimmering pool that reflected the brilliant California sunlight, Jessica's home was her sanctuary, a space she had poured her soul into designing, each detail carefully chosen to reflect the life she had built from the ground up. There was something soothing about the quiet mornings where the only sounds were the chirping birds and the soft rustle of palm leaves. But lately, that peace had been shattered, violated. She could no longer sit by her kitchen window, cradling her favorite mug, without feeling her blood pressure spike at the sight of someone else lounging by her pool like they had a right to be there. It was infuriating, and more than that, it was personal. Jessica wasn't just defending her property. She was defending everything it represented. All the nights she had worked late, all the sacrifices she made, all led to this house, her safe haven. And she'd be damned if she let some entitled stranger trample all over her hard-won success. It had started subtly, like a whisper of wrongness Jessica tried to ignore. A damp towel draped carelessly over one of her lounge chairs. An empty glass glistening under the afternoon sun, left shamelessly on her patio table. At first, she convinced herself it was nothing, just the gardeners or maybe something blown over by the ocean breeze. But then came the unmistakable wet footprints, shadowed outlines stretching from the edge of her pool to the stone pathway like ghostly reminders of someone's unwelcome presence. Jessica's stomach twisted every time she noticed the clues left behind, her sense of safety slowly unraveling like a loose thread. This was her sanctuary, her private slice of Malibu. Yet somehow, a stranger had decided her hard-earned peace was theirs for taking. And then she saw her, bold as daylight. It was early one Saturday morning, the air still cool and dewy, when Jessica stood by her kitchen counter, cradling her coffee like it was the only thing holding her together. She glanced through the glass doors, her eyes locking onto a figure sprawled across her lounge chair, as if she belonged there, legs crossed, sunglasses on, flipping lazily through a glossy magazine with the sort of arrogance that sent Jessica's blood boiling. Jessica's fingers tightened around her coffee cup, knuckles turning white. The sheer audacity of it was like a punch to the gut. Who the hell did this woman think she was? Jessica yanked open the sliding door, her voice sharp and angry as it cut through the cool morning air. "Excuse me, what the hell do you think you're doing?" The woman didn't even flinch, just lifted her sunglasses, her smirk dripping with entitlement. "Oh, hey, didn't think you'd mind. It's just so hot today." Jessica's heartbeat roared in her ears, but underneath the fury was something else, a cold, simmering determination. Whoever this woman was, she had just made a huge mistake. Jessica had hoped her outburst would be enough to scare off her unwanted guest, but apparently the woman was just as stubborn as she was obnoxious. Her name, as Jessica learned through gritted teeth during their brief encounter, was Rachel Collins, a 30-something with perpetual tan, an overconfident smirk, and apparently the belief that Jessica's pool was some kind of public amenity. After Rachel sauntered back to her own house that morning, muttering something about Jessica being way too uptight, Jessica assumed that would be the end of it, but she was wrong. So very wrong. 2 days later, Jessica returned home from a hellish day at work, her head pounding from back-to-back Zoom calls. All she wanted was to sink into her couch with a glass of Cabernet and forget the world existed. But the moment she stepped outside to enjoy the cool evening air, her eyes landed on a half-empty bottle of rose sitting on her patio table. The condensation still glistened on the glass, mocking her. And those wet footprints? Yeah, they were back too. Jessica's mouth dropped open. The nerve of this woman. Rachel wasn't just disrespectful. She was practically challenging her. Like this was some sort of twisted game where Rachel kept pushing boundaries just to see how far she could go before Jessica broke. Well, Jessica was done playing nice. Because what Rachel clearly didn't understand was that Jessica Carter wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. So she marched over to Rachel's house, her fists clenched and her mind buzzing with every profanity she'd ever learned. When Rachel opened the door, looking annoyingly unbothered and somehow still perfect, Jessica didn't bother with pleasantries. "I don't know what kind of entitlement makes you think my backyard is yours," Jessica snapped. "But it stops now." Rachel's response? A casual, irritatingly dismissive laugh. "Oh, come on. It's just a pool. Chill out." Chill out? Jessica's left eye actually twitched. If Rachel wanted war, then Jessica was about to show her what that really meant. Jessica was done. She was done with the rose bottles littering her patio like glitter at a college party. Done with wet footprints smeared across her pristine stone deck. And definitely done with Rachel Collins acting like Jessica's property was some kind of community pool. So she did what any sane, determined woman with a passion for order and a high-speed Wi-Fi connection would do. She ordered security cameras. 3 of them, top-of-the-line, high-definition, night vision equipped. The kind that would make any nosy neighbor think twice. The cameras arrived 2 days later, and Jessica wasted no time installing them herself. One aimed directly at the pool, its lens sharp and unforgiving. Another covered the gate entrance, where Rachel's delicate footprints kept appearing like ghostly signatures. And the last one watched over the back patio, where Jessica's once peaceful mornings were now haunted by someone else's carelessness. Jessica felt a twisted sort of satisfaction when she tested the cameras, her phone lighting up with crystal-clear footage of her own annoyed face scowling into the lens. Perfect. If Rachel even so much as breathed near her backyard again, Jessica would have undeniable proof. And of course, Rachel wasn't one to disappoint. Saturday afternoon rolled around, and Jessica had plans. A well-deserved spa day and a nice dinner afterward pretend her life wasn't slowly being invaded by a smug, rose-loving parasite. She locked the gate, double-checked the cameras, and left, hoping against hope that Rachel had finally learned to keep her overly bronzed, overly confident self on her side of the property line. When Jessica returned that evening, refreshed and smelling of lavender oils, her phone pinged. A notification from the security app. Her eyes narrowed as she opened the app. And there it was. Rachel, clear as day, strolling through the side yard with her towel and whined like she owned the place. The woman didn't just go for a swim. No, she made a whole afternoon of it. Floating on a pool lounger, sipping wine, flipping through a magazine like she was some spoiled heiress on vacation. Jessica's lips curled into a smile, because this time she had all the evidence she needed. And Rachel Collins was about to learn what happened when you mess with the wrong woman. Jessica's smile didn't fade as she scrolled through the security footage, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of outrage and something darker, anticipation. Rachel Collins had made herself a nuisance for the last time. Oh, Jessica could have gone polite route, called the police, pressed charges. But where was the fun in that? No, Jessica had a better idea. Something that would finally drill the concept of boundaries into Rachel's infuriatingly dense skull. It only took one quick trip to the local pool supply store and a handful of mildly concerning internet searches before Jessica's plan was ready to go. She stood at her pool's edge the next morning, clutching 2 bottles, one filled with perfectly harmless but incredibly potent liquid designed to smell like a cross between rotten eggs and gym socks left out in the rain. The other? A food-grade dye that would leave its victim looking like a smurf with anger issues. And the best part? It was completely invisible until it hit water. Jessica poured her concoction into the pool, swirling the liquid around with the handle of her pool net, like she was some evil witch brewing a potion. In a way, she supposed she was just a much cleaner, more sophisticated witch with a very specific target in mind. The whole setup was deviously perfect. The dye would cling to skin and hair for days, a nightmare to wash off. And the smell? Oh, that was a piece de resistance. A stench so vile it would haunt Rachel's nostrils like some horrible perfume gone terribly wrong. Once everything was in place, Jessica stood back and admired her work. Now, all she had to do was wait. And Rachel, with her tendency to trespass like it was a sport, wouldn't be able to resist. Jessica sat back, phone in hand. Security app pulled up, ready to enjoy the show. Because when Rachel took her next entitled dip, she was in for a shock, and Jessica was going to save her every single moment. Jessica didn't have to wait long. By noon, the Malibu sun was blazing, its rays bouncing off the water like molten silver. And right on schedule, Rachel Collins slithered her way through the side gate, towel and rose in hand, like some kind of suburban predator stalking her favorite watering hole. Jessica watched the live feed from her phone with the sort of excitement normally reserved for a season finale of a binge-worthy TV show. The moment Rachel set her things down on the patio table and dipped her toe into the water, Jessica's smile widened. Rachel slipped into the pool with all the grace of someone who believed the world owed them everything. She let out a satisfied sigh, her arms floating effortlessly along the cool water surface. For a moment, she just basked there, her arrogance practically shimmering in the air like heat waves. But then it happened. Jessica saw the exact moment Rachel's serene expression shifted. The confusion first, her eyes narrowing as she glanced down at her arms. Then the panic, as she sniffed the air and her face twisted in absolute horror. Jessica had to cover her mouth to keep from cackling like a madwoman. Rachel's skin was turning a horrifying shade of dark blue, her golden hair now streaked with what looked like navy ink. And the smell? Oh! Judging by the way Rachel gagged and nearly choked on her own breath, it was hitting her hard. Rachel flailed her way out of the pool, slipping and stumbling like a newborn deer, her feet skidding across the wet tiles as she snatched her towel. But it was too late. The dye clung to her skin like a jealous lover, and the foul odor followed her like a ghost. Jessica couldn't help herself. She laughed, loud, unrestrained, and completely satisfying, because Rachel Collins had just learned the hard way that entitlement didn't mix well with pool water and revenge. Now, all Jessica had to do was wait for Rachel's next move, because somehow this was only getting started. Jessica's satisfaction lasted all of 5 minutes before the shouting began. Rachel's high-pitched, furious wail echoed to the neighborhood like a cat in a blender. Jessica watched from her kitchen window as the blue-streaked woman stormed across her own yard, arms flailing in dripping dye like some deranged sea creature clawing its way to shore. But the real fun started when Rachel banged on Jessica's front door, her fists pounding against the wood, with all the fury of a spoiled toddler denied dessert. Jessica took her time answering, making sure her face wore the perfect mask of innocent concern. When she finally swung the door open, Rachel was there, hair clumped into sticky blue tendrils, skin tinted like she'd rolled around in a vat of blueberry jam, and that smell. Oh, God, that smell was so strong it practically punched Jessica in the nose. "What the hell did you do to me?" Rachel screeched, her voice cracking like ice. "I look like a freaking smuff, and I smell like roadkill." Jessica blinked, all innocence and wide-eyed disbelief. "Me? I didn't do anything. You were trespassing on my property. Again." Rachel's nostrils flared. "This is illegal. You poisoned me." Jessica let out a snort of laughter before she could stop herself. "Oh, please. It's food-grade dye and a harmless stink spray. Not exactly lethal, unless you're allergic to bad decisions." Rachel's face twisted, but the anger quickly gave way to embarrassment, because deep down, even she knew Jessica had a point. "Listen, Rachel," Jessica said, her tone sharp as glass. "You've been trespassing on my property for weeks. You ignored my warnings, laughed off my complaints, and treated my backyard like it was your own personal resort. All I did was make sure you'd remember that it's not." Rachel's expression shifted from fury to humiliation, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her own entitlement. But instead of apologizing, she spun on her heel, muttering profanities as she trudged back toward her house, dripping blue stains onto the sidewalk like a trail of shame. Jessica watched her go, arms folded across her chest, feeling more victorious than she'd ever felt in her life. Rachel had pushed her limits, and Jessica had pushed back even harder. But something told her Rachel wasn't quite done causing trouble. And Jessica, she was ready for whatever came next. Jessica was prepared for Rachel's inevitable revenge attempt. After all, a woman who would shamelessly trespass on someone else's property for weeks wasn't the type to just walk away with her tail between her legs. So Jessica made sure her security cameras were working, every lock was double-checked, and the evidence of Rachel's trespassing was safely stored on a hard drive that she'd named, rather smugly, Operation Entitled Brat. What Jessica hadn't expected, though, was how spectacularly Rachel would manage to humiliate herself. 2 days later, a police cruiser pulled up outside Jessica's house. She watched from her kitchen window, her eyebrows lifting in genuine surprise. Moments later, the officers made their way to her front door, their expressions already filled with a mix of exasperation and suspicion. Jessica greeted them with a polite smile. "Officers, how can I help you?" The older cop, a gruff-looking man with the demeanor of someone who had seen too much nonsense in his career, sighed. "Ma'am, your neighbor over there says you poison her. Care to explain?" Jessica stifled a laugh, her lips twitching with the effort. "Ah, yes, that would be Rachel. Would you like to see the security footage?" It took less than 5 minutes for Jessica to pull up the pristine, high-definition videos of Rachel waltzing into her yard, bottle of rose in hand, like she was some sort of poolside queen. The officers exchanged glances, their faces shifting from skepticism to pure irritation. "So, you're saying she trespassed?" The younger cop asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. "Yes, repeatedly, after I told her to stop, and I have all the footage you need to prove it." Jessica's smile widened. "Honestly, I was pretty patient. But when patience doesn't work, creativity certainly helps." The older cop's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Well, ma'am, as far as we can see, she's the one in the wrong here." "Oh, I'm very aware of that." Jessica folded her arms, satisfaction blooming in her chest. "And if she comes anywhere near my pool again, I will press charges." The officers left Rachel's property with a warning about trespassing laws and a stern suggestion that she learn to keep her entitled self on her side of the fence. As the patrol car drove away, Jessica leaned against her doorframe, grinning as if she'd just scored the game-winning touchdown. The score? Jessica 1, Rachel 0, and something told her Rachel was about to learn that messing with Jessica Carter was a very, very bad idea. The police visit may have been a wake-up call for Rachel, but Jessica knew better than to let her guard down. Entitled people like Rachel rarely took responsibility for their actions. They twisted the truth to fit their own narrative and lashed out when the world didn't bend to their will. Jessica had spent enough years working her way up the corporate ladder to recognize the type. People who felt the rules didn't apply to them. People who believed someone else's hard work was theirs to use. But this time, Jessica had drawn a line in the sand, and Rachel was forced to confront her own reflection in the unforgiving mirror of consequences. The humiliation she endured was nothing more than a taste of accountability, a lesson served cold and unforgiving. It was funny, in a way. Jessica had never been the kind of person to seek revenge. She preferred peace over conflict, logic over pettiness. But sometimes, standing up for yourself meant refusing to be anyone's doormat. And in this case, that meant fighting fire with a little creativity. What Rachel failed to understand was that respect was a two-way street. Jessica's patience had been mistaken for weakness, her politeness seen as permission. But Jessica wasn't the type to let someone walk all over her just to keep the peace. The truth was, boundaries were necessary, not just to protect what was yours, but to protect your own sanity. Jessica knew this whole ordeal was about more than just a pool. It was about reclaiming her peace of mind, about reminding herself that she had the right to enjoy the life she'd built without someone else's arrogance disrupting her sanctuary. And as Rachel fumed behind her own door, scrubbing at her stained skin and nursing her bruised ego, Jessica allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, because this wasn't just about winning. It was about drawing a line and standing firm. It was about taking back her peace, her pride, and her power. In the end, Rachel might never truly understand what she did wrong, but Jessica had learned something valuable through the ordeal. Protecting your peace sometimes meant putting your foot down, even if it left a few entitled people bruised along the way. The quiet was almost surreal. Days passed without a single wet footprint on Jessica's patio, no half-empty wine bottles littering her tables, and no smug trespasser lounging in her pool like she owned the place. For the first time in weeks, Jessica woke up to peaceful mornings where the only sounds were the distant waves crashing against the Malibu shoreline and the soft rustling of palm trees swaying in the breeze. But Jessica wasn't naive. She kept her security cameras on, still locked her gates religiously, and made sure every inch of her property was secured, just in case. Because while she believed Rachel had finally learned her lesson, entitlement was a stubborn beast that didn't always bow to reason. A week later, Jessica spotted the moving truck. She had been watering her flowers when she saw it pull up in front of Rachel's house, its metallic sheen glinting under the afternoon sun. Movers carried boxes from the house to the truck, their grunts and shouts filling the air as they heaved heavy furniture into the back. And there was Rachel, pacing back and forth on her porch, still looking as if her entire world had crumbled. Her hair, once golden and perfectly styled, was now a patchy mess, still bearing faint traces of the disastrous dye job. Jessica watched with a calm satisfaction as Rachel snapped orders at the movers, her voice shrill and strained. Whether Rachel's decision to move was a long-planned event or a result of sheer humiliation, Jessica didn't care. The important thing was that her sanctuary was finally hers again. But beyond the smug satisfaction of victory, Jessica had gained something more valuable: clarity. She had learned that protecting her peace meant being firm, unapologetic, and willing to stand her ground, even when it meant upsetting someone who refused to respect her boundaries. People like Rachel were everywhere. Jessica knew that, but she also knew she was stronger than she'd ever given herself credit for. And the next time someone tried to take what was hers, she'd be ready. Because the real victory wasn't just getting Rachel to leave. It was knowing she had every right to fight for her peace of mind.